You know, Rose, I was thinking before I came into the studio today that I should
You
have
were
made.
thinking.
I was thinking I should have made a large bag of popcorn for today's episode. Do you know why?
Why?
Do you remember the last time we talked with Tal Zaks?
It's been a while, but I remember being wrapped.
Wrapped, entertained. The stories were just titillating, right? Like I was on the edge of my seat,
Yes.
sometimes in disbelief, and I thought,
Mm-hmm.
this is a popcorn-worthy episode.
Yeah.
Alas, I did not bring any popcorn.
To my chagrin.
I'm sorry. Next time.
Bad planning.
A lot of people know him as the guy who was chief medical officer at Moderna before, during, and after the company became a household name thanks to its mRNA-based answer to COVID. But even without that gold star next to his name, Dr. Tal Zaks has built a fascinating career as a physician scientist, an investor, a board member, and a biotech builder. Today, he's CEO and chair of the board of directors at Exsilio Therapeutics, a non-executive director at 5 companies, I think, including Teva Pharmaceuticals, a private equity partner at OrbiMed, and probably holds a few more titles that I'm missing.
Storyteller.
He's a not that we're setting the bar too high for Tal right now, but he is a prolific storyteller.
Dr. Seuss over here.
I'm Matt Pillar.
And I'm Anna Rose Welch.
And on today's episode of the Business of Biotech, it's story time with Tal. So stay tuned because the stories Tal tells are not tall tales, although I guess they would be tall tales, just not in the way you think I meant it.
Wow. That's a new level.
You didn't see that coming,
No,
did you?
I didn't. And that really hit me over the head like a shovel.
His stories are packed with biotech business building, insights gained over a career spent spanning leadership roles at GSK, Sanofi, Teva, Moderna, OrbiMed, and now Exsilio Therapeutics, and probably, like I said, a whole lot more. Tal, welcome to the show.
It's a real pleasure to be here.
We are absolutely thrilled to have you. And as I said, I'm sorry if we set the bar too high, but the last time we chatted, Anna Rose and I came away thinking like this guy has got so many great anecdotes that not only great stories, but like a lot of meat in them, right? A lot of meat for biotech builders. So we're really looking forward to the conversation today. We have a ton to get through. I don't know if we'll do it all in one episode. We might have to revisit with a part 2. But before we get into the Exsilio story, I want to get to know you a little bit and intro you to the audience. So, and I'm going to go way back. We're going to rewind the clock quite a ways. You immigrated to the U.S. from Israel to do your postdoc at the National Cancer Institute, and presumably at the time practiced medicine. I mean, you practiced medicine back then. What when you made that move, was that your sole intention career-wise to come over here and practice?
To be fair, back in the day, I just had an opportunity to come to the mecca of scientific research. Now, I trained in the early days as a physician scientist, an MD, PhD. It wasn't really a track. I sort of built it because I got interested in an area of medicine that's called tumor immunology. Back then, it wasn't the thing that it has become since, but I was super curious, and I had a wonderful opportunity to come to the lab of Dr. Steve Rosenberg at the National Cancer Institute. And, as an immigrant coming from across to the mecca of the NIH, you don't really think what's going to happen next. You just say, boy, I'm at a place that has really redefined our understanding of immuno-oncology, benefits for patients with cancer, and the sky's the limit. And I have to tell you, I am to this day a very proud immigrant to this country, and really, if anything, have been fortunate to take advantage of an ecosystem where truly the sky's the limit in terms of what we can achieve for patients, for ourselves, for mankind. So I, in all honesty, I knew I was a physician. I had some interest in science, and I just wanted to explore it.
Yeah, you just went, and that ecosystem has opened up a lot of doors, in the periphery, in front of you, maybe in some cases behind you, and you've seemingly taken advantage of every door that's presented itself.
Well, to be fair, I have to tell you, the first 3 years were actually marked by a lot of failure. And in fact, after 3 years there, I tried to get a cancer vaccine to work. I actually proved why it didn't work. I tried to understand immuno-oncology. We had a theory as to what could be what are today called checkpoints. We actually debunked it, and it wasn't that. And after kind of 3 years, I said, "Oof, I better go back and finish my clinical training."
Did I make the wrong leap?
Yeah, and it taught me the value of scientific depth. But I can tell you, years later, when I came upon a saying by the late Nelson Mandela, it's become my favorite quote of all time. And he said, "In life, I've either succeeded or I've learned." To be fair, in those early days, I had a lot of learnings. Still do to this day.
Yeah. It's a common refrain, but it's like there's a dichotomy. It's like it's a common refrain, but it's all too often forgotten in this industry, right?
Well, and I think, we tend to just package it as, well, that was a failure instead of a learning, right? It's really just a terminology change, but reframing it.
After you
I do think that when things don't go as expected, that's actually when you grow and when you learn the most. In fact, in a roundabout way, and we'll come back to this later, one of the fascinating things for me to reflect on COVID was, here's something that succeeded beyond my wildest expectations. So, what did I learn from that? Because there are learnings from that success, but it's actually, maybe counterintuitively, it's easier to learn from failures than it is from successes.
Yeah. Sticking back in that time frame, after you completed your residency at Temple and your fellowship at Penn, you joined GSK to work in clinical development and translational medicine. So tell us why you made that transition to industry.
I have to say that was a completely non-obvious move to me at the time. I had spent many years in training in academia, an internship, another internship, a residency, a postdoc, a fellowship, and as I was finishing my fellowship, I actually won an ASCO Young Investigator Award. This thing handed out to fellows. You've got a little bit of research budget, and I came home really proud. My son, who was 12, looks up at me and says, "Dad, what's all the commotion about?" I was clearly excited, and I looked at him and said, "Well, I just won this Young Investigator Award." And the kid looks up at me and says, "Dad, what do you mean Young Investigator Award? Like, how old are you?" And I look at the kid, and he had a point. I was in my 38, 39, and he's 12 and heading up to college in a few years. And here I am having fun, training, learning, seeing patients. But it really kind of brought it home that, okay, maybe it's time to actually go do something in the world. And while I trained myself thinking I was going to be an academic physician, I started my life actually as a pediatric intensive care unit nurse, and I worked as a nurse on that side of the patient's bed, if you will, as I was training to be a physician. And I always appreciated teamwork. And, the academic world is driven by the axiom that there can only be one first author. A few years before that, I interviewed at a very prestigious institution and for fellowship. And they said, "Great, yeah, we'll have you as a fellow." And with a little bit of chutzpah, I asked them, "Well, if I come here as a fellow, how quickly can I be faculty?" And they said, "Oh, okay, let's think about that." And they took it up the flagpole, and down came the answer. It said, "Look, we've looked at your resume. Yeah, you did a postdoc at the NIH. You had some papers, great, but you actually had more second authorships than first authorships. So we're not really sure about you." And I have to tell you, I really took that to heart, because I was actually more proud of the second authorships, because when you're a second authorship, it means you got to be part of something. Somebody else did the work. You got to play a role in enjoying it, leading it, thinking through it, while you were doing other stuff as well. And so when the time came to sort of make the career move, the notion that I could actually go do it in a more team-based environment where really the purpose was getting better drugs, I just found that appealing. And if you take a medicine and you open it up, whether it's tabs or a vial, you'll see there's a piece of paper rolled up in that most people throw away. Well, if you open up that paper, it's actually the label. It's what the FDA says you should use it. And if you look at where, who signed off on that label, where do these drugs come from? Well, they don't come from the university and they don't come from the National Institutes of Health. They actually come from drug companies. And so if you, as your mission in life, want to actually do better, especially in oncology with the state of affair of drugs, while we have very good drugs, we should and could do better. And you want to be part of that doing better, then you go to where the action is. You go to where these medicines are made to have an impact. And that's sort of what propelled me to, despite having trained for so long, to be an academic physician, to actually shift gears and try it out in industry.
Speaking of being in the place that makes the medicines, you continue to play your hand at a place that makes a lot of medicines in Teva. You've been there since 2021 as a board member. It's one of the world's largest generics companies. Tell us about that experience and how it's informed your take on the market.
I have to tell you, I'm super proud of that. And I'm proud at a very deep level because what Teva does is a reflection of the breadth of contribution to our industry that's often lost when we think of purely innovative companies. The innovation at the heart of the ecosystem is protected by intellectual property. And that is the engine that's allowed us to be so productive in the US in the last 50 years as the leaders of the world of therapeutic benefit. But the beauty is that contract with society actually plays out in the long run once the intellectual property expires. And you now have generic medicines. And, the statin pill I take every morning, and the fact that my late father managed to live for 40 years with chronic heart disease and, taking 5, 6, 7 different meds, those were all generics, or most of them were. And by now, all of them are, right? And so the benefit of the previous era is now available to society at a fraction of the cost, thanks to that. And in the discussion that we have about, cost of drugs, and intellectual property and all the other stuff, we often forget that there's a very long tail of benefit that we just keep raising the bar, and then the price goes down years later for everybody to enjoy, and that's worldwide. And so I take tremendous pride in Teva's contribution, both on the innovative side. We are an innovative company. We do develop innovative medicines, but also on the generic underpinning of that provides drugs for hundreds of millions of people every day.
It frees up, right? It frees up cost, right? And money to be able to cover the innovative stuff, right? The breaking new drugs on the market that aren't as cheap as generics, right? Or as biosimilars. So it pays into that innovation in its own way.